It was Lucas's birthday party that day, and I woke up at 5:30, not because of an alarm. My internal clock had been rewired years ago during those early parenting days. The sky was still dark. A soft pink-orange glow barely touched the kitchen window. I sat up quietly. The house was still. The only sounds were the steady tick of the wall clock and the sudden hiss of the neighbor's sprinkler system. My knees were stiff, an old ache I'd come to expect, like a tired violin string stretched too long, still humming faintly with every movement. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few seconds before standing up, bones creaking, muscles complaining in whispers I'd long learned to ignore. My fingers brushed over the crumpled memo pad beside me, a handwritten list of everything I needed to prep for the day. I used to write things down out of forgetfulness. Now I wrote to stay anchored, proof that I was still capable of holding it all together. Technically, this party was supposed to be organized by Brian and Natalie. They were the ones who had declared enthusiastically, "It's time for a real backyard party, big but simple." The idea, of course, was theirs. The execution? That fell, naturally and wordlessly, to me. "It's just easier at your place," Natalie had said over the phone, her voice smooth and cheerful, as though the request were a compliment rather than a redirection of labor. "Your backyard's bigger and it gets more sun." There was a pause, then a sugar-coated addition. "And the kids love your blueberry muffins." It sounded like affection. But I knew better. It meant, "You'll do the work and we'll show up and smile for the pictures." 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a barrage of screenshots. A Pinterest-perfect party list. Cream cheese puffs, mini cheeseburgers, Sophie's favorite chocolate chip pancakes. There were even notes for the drinks. Not from concentrate, cold pressed only. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. A sigh rose but never quite escaped. Instead, I typed back, "No problem." 2 words that felt more like a surrender than an agreement. I tied on my apron and flicked on the kitchen lights. As the refrigerator hummed to life and the scent of rising dough met me at the door, I felt like a stagehand behind the curtain, prepping the scene for a grand performance. Except in this production, there would be no applause, no standing ovation. Just cake crumbs, sticky plates, and guests who left without asking if I needed help with cleanup. The corn chowder simmered gently on the stove. The cream cake I had prepared the night before was rising nicely in the oven, its scent already curling into the corners of the house. I whipped the frosting with steady wrists, each turn of the mixer like a chant in a sacred ritual. Whir, pause, scrape, repeat. These movements, so familiar, were muscle memory. My house, my body, my time turned into an invisible engine powering someone else's celebration. By 9:30, Brian and his family arrived. "Mom, we're here!" he called as he pushed open the door, voice still echoing with a boyishness that tugged at something old and soft in me. For a moment, I glimpsed the child who used to run through this house with grass-stained knees and bright eyes. But that moment passed. Natalie entered behind him in beige heels, her coat draped over her arm, holding a clear plastic container with manicured precision. Her eyes scanned the room like a critic at a dress rehearsal. "You didn't get the tablecloth on yet?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Didn't you have a pale gold one last time? This blue clashes with the balloon colors." I looked up from the frosting bowl and smiled. "The gold one got ruined in the wash last year. This one's new." She didn't respond to the explanation. Her eyes drifted next to the drink bucket. "Is orange juice all we've got? We usually do lemon soda." "Lucas doesn't like anything too sweet." I opened my mouth to say, "You didn't mention that," but closed it. Instead, I said, "I can check the fridge again." "Oh, don't bother." She waved her hand like brushing away lint. "I'm just saying." Lucas was already eyeing the kitchen counter. I had placed his gift there, carefully wrapped. Light gray-blue merino wool, hand-knit over several evenings when my fingers ached and my eyes blurred. A little lion was sewn onto the chest, a quiet nod to his favorite stuffed animal from when he was smaller. He tore the ribbon, lifted the lid, looked at it for 2 seconds, and then tossed the box onto the bench like it held a pair of used socks. His interest had already moved on to the trampoline in the yard. "You still knit?" Natalie had caught sight of the sweater and let out a soft laugh. "Wow, you've really got time on your hands. But don't waste the effort, he's not going to wear that." My hand paused mid-wipe on the carving knife. She didn't wait for an answer. She was already walking toward the back patio to inspect the symmetry of the balloons. I lowered my eyes and resumed wiping the knife clean, but something sat heavy and sharp in my chest. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, just that familiar, quiet ache, invisible again. By 10:30, Angela's family showed up, fashionably late as always. The slam of the car door was followed by Max's voice piercing the air. "Let me out. I want to go in first." Then came the thud, thud, thud of his sneakers on the freshly mopped wood floor. His face and shirt were already smeared with icing from a donut he was half finished devouring. "Max!" Angela's voice followed him down the hall, phone pressed to her ear, breathless but disengaged. "Don't make a mess," she shouted, not even glancing up. "Yeah, I'll be in San Francisco next Wednesday morning. No, let John cover that first." "Listen to me." I gently took Max's coat, led him to the bathroom, and closed the door behind him so he could wash up. I was halfway through checking his hands for stickiness when I heard Angela's voice drift in again from the hallway. "She's used to doing everything, just let her handle it, don't worry." Her tone was breezy, like she was talking about the weather, like I was a system, reliable, tireless, always available, not a person with limits, not a woman with thoughts or a body that grew tired, just a role, a function. I looked in the mirror above the sink. For a moment I didn't recognize the woman staring back. There were faint dark circles under her eyes, a smudge of flour on her cheek, wrinkles around her mouth that hadn't been there a decade ago. She looked like someone who'd spent a lifetime saying yes when no one thought to ask if she ever wanted to say no. And still, there I was, making the party happen, as expected. But something inside me stirred that morning, not loudly, not with fire, just the quiet shift of something starting to unstick. A thought began to form. What would happen if I didn't do it all next time? What if I left the muffins unbaked, the tablecloth unmatched, the balloons unsymmetrical? What if I chose me? He was talking to Dennis. He had been standing by the kitchen doorway, halfway to helping me plate the appetizers. I saw his hand extend, then freeze midair when his wife's words reached him. Dennis nodded and stepped back, but when his eyes met mine, there was an awkward, flickering guilt in them. The party picked up quickly. Kids were shrieking and chasing each other around the backyard. Max tumbled headfirst into the grass and came up with mud all over his pants. Natalie glanced over and said, "It's fine. He's having fun." Lucas was spinning in circles beneath the balloons, while Sophie and two girls huddled in a corner working on a collage. I was in the kitchen laying out salad, fruit tarts, a platter of wings, keeping one eye on the soda bucket to make sure there was enough lemon and grape soda to go around. When it came time for the family photo, I was still drying my hands, getting the last batch of chicken bites out of the oven. Sophie came running in, tugged at my apron, and chirped, "Grandma, come on! We're taking pictures." "She can finish up first," Angela said, appearing behind her and casually redirecting her daughter without missing a beat. "She'll be there in a minute." I stood at the kitchen door, watching them line up in front of the wicker chairs. Brian with his arm around Natalie, Dennis with a hand on Angela's shoulder, kids beaming like a family from a commercial. The camera shutter clicked just as I stepped forward, still holding a tray of Lucas's favorite chicken nuggets. The steam rose around me in little clouds, and suddenly my eyes stung. In that moment, I felt like I wasn't part of the picture. I was part of the backdrop, the quiet figure behind the scenes, always busy, never in the frame. By the time I set the tray down and looked up again, the group had already scattered. Angela was back on her phone. Natalie was scrolling through the party photos, zooming in to check if she looked good. The kids were gone, vanished into the yard or the house. I turned back toward the kitchen. Cake crumbs dusted the counter. The sink was piled with bowls, glasses, one overturned juice cup, and two crumpled towels smeared with frosting. A thought flickered through my mind like a match strike. How did I become the stagehand in my own family's life? I couldn't even remember the last time I sat on the couch and ate a piece of cake without jumping up mid-bite. The party ended faster than I expected. The noise vanished like a tide going out. One last kid ran out the back door with a balloon trailing behind him, and then slam, the door shut. Silence. Just juice stains, bits of cream, and me. I stood by the door and watched them load the cars. Angela waved as she slammed the trunk shut. "Mom, I'm flying to Chicago next week," she called out. "I'll pack tonight. Can you come by in a couple days to check Sophie and Max's school schedule?" I nodded. I hadn't even caught the full sentence. I just nodded because that's what I always did. Natalie, on her way into the car, casually handed me a few bags of half-eaten snacks. "You keep these. No sense wasting them." She didn't mention the sweater. Lucas left with every new toy he'd unwrapped, except one. The neatly packaged box with the hand-knit sweater sat untouched in the corner of my kitchen, like a misplaced puzzle piece that didn't belong anywhere. Grandma's sweaters are so old-fashioned, Lucas had said, tone dipped in mockery. Before I could react, Natalie chuckled. Don't be so blunt. Then, glancing my way, she added without pause, Marilyn, maybe next time skip the handmade stuff. He's into graphic hoodies now, not sweaters. She said it while shoving gift bags into the back seat, not a trace of hesitation on her face. I stared at the box. The sweater lay inside, untouched. My chest clenched like something sharp had jabbed it. The car door slammed, the engine started, and then silence again, the kind that hums through your bones like the last few hours had never happened at all. I stood frozen for a few minutes, still clutching the ribbon I'd used to tie that box just the night before. I remembered the hours I spent knitting it, each stitch a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, Lucas would wear it to school one day and tell his friends that his grandma made it just for him, that maybe he'd even feel proud. I chose his favorite colors. I'd even sewn on a little tag inside the collar, made with love by Grandma. But now it sat in the corner like a failed offering, unwanted and irrelevant. I took off my apron and turned toward the kitchen. It was a war zone. Unfinished salad wilting on the counter, paper cups overturned. Max's donut lay on the carpet, flattened into a sticky black stain. In the sink, a greasy baking tray soaked in cold water. The cake knife stuck upright in a tub of frosting. A soggy dish towel lay slumped beside it. I bent down to pick up a shattered glass, and the sharp edge nicked my fingertip. Blood welled instantly. I winced, pressing my thumb against it. The house was too quiet. So quiet I could hear my heartbeat and the wall clock ticking like mockery. I sat in the kitchen chair, wrapping a paper towel around my finger, staring out the window. The sky was gray, the kind of heavy gray that presses on your shoulders. Wind nudged the balloons in the yard. They rustled softly, almost like laughter. And in that moment, I didn't feel tired in the way that meant rest or sleep. I felt tired in my bones, the kind of tired that empties you out from the inside. I remembered another time I was cleaning the kitchen. Frank was on the couch watching a football game. I asked if he could take the trash out. He didn't even look up. You do this stuff all day. It's not even real work. Why should I help? I didn't say a word, just picked up the garbage bag and walked out. It was windy that day, so windy I almost lost my footing. Even then, I told myself, he's just not good at expressing himself. He loves me. He just shows it differently. But now I know better. That was just me lying to myself. I thought about calling Natalie. I could have told her that the sweater wasn't just a sweater, that it was the last thing I'd made with these hands before the arthritis started locking them up in the morning, that I'd stayed up late 3 nights in a row just to finish it in time, that I thought maybe if I gave Lucas something made with my own 2 hands, he'd feel close to me in a way store-bought toys never could. But I didn't call, because I already knew how that conversation would go. "Oh, Mom, you're being dramatic." Or worse, the silence. The kind where she's still on the phone but has nothing left to say. I stood up and walked to the corner, picked up the box. It felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it wasn't the box. Maybe it was everything it carried. I set it on the table, opened it, and ran my fingers over the folded yarn. My hands trembled, not from pain, at least not the kind anyone could see. Then slowly I pulled the sweater out, pressed it to my chest, and wept, quietly. So quietly I could still hear the balloons tapping against the window. The kitchen light cast shadows across my face. In the reflection on the oven door, I saw myself. Fine lines at the corners of my eyes, pale skin, loose strands of hair not yet tied back, and those faint smudges under my eyes. And suddenly I asked myself, what am I to them really? A mother? A grandmother? Or just an endless supply of free labor? I remembered who I used to be, back when I taught piano at the local music school. I wore kitten heels, curled my hair, wore lipstick. Frank used to say, "When you play, you make the piano come alive." But after we got married, he changed. "The world's too messy out there," he said. "You're safer at home." After the kids were born, I tried going back to teaching. It didn't even last 3 months before the passive-aggressive remarks started. "We don't need you bringing in money. I need you here taking care of the house." So I gave in. Told myself it was for family, for love, for duty. And today, the sweater I knitted with care was called not useful. The party I planned from scratch was seen as expected, then picked apart detail by detail. They didn't even wait for me to join the family photo. When the glass cut my hand, not a single person asked, "Are you okay?" or said, "Let me help with that." That night, I cleaned the kitchen inch by inch, swept the crumbs, wiped the juice stains, picked up the broken glass piece by piece. I folded Lucas's sweater carefully, laid it in the bottom drawer, then I turned off the lights and sat alone in the living room. The room was dim. Streetlights cast a pale glow through the window, landing on my hand still wrapped in a paper towel to stop the bleeding. And I asked myself one question: how much longer do I keep doing this? The next morning it wasn't even 8 when I heard the familiar slam of a car door. I didn't need to pull the curtain back. I already knew who it was. Angela's SUV stopped in the driveway. The tires were still rolling when Max jumped out, shouting, "I'm bringing the green skateboard inside." I opened the door. Angela was dragging a suitcase with one hand, phone clamped between her shoulder and ear, face tight with urgency and fatigue. She was mid-call, talking fast. "I'm at my mom's now. Yeah, I need that deck finalized before the morning briefing. Beth didn't respond yesterday." Dennis gave me a look that meant take the bag. I took it, then gently grabbed Max by the sleeve as he started tearing apart my couch cushions. "Easy there, kiddo. Don't hide the remote again." Angela ended the call and flashed a mechanical smile. "Mom, you're amazing, seriously. I've got to catch a flight. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Today they're all yours." "I thought you said your trip was next week?" I asked, quiet but confused. She paused, blinked as if trying to recall her own timeline, then let out a small laugh. "Flight changed. Booking's a nightmare lately. You know how it is." I didn't say anything, just nodded. Max was already in the kitchen, digging through drawers for candy. My freshly cleaned floors were stamped with muddy little footprints. In less than 2 minutes, he picked up one of my spice jars, twisted the lid off, and asked, "Grandma, can this be a rocket launcher?" "No," I said softly. "Put it down." He didn't. He twisted harder until, snap, salt exploded across the floor. He laughed like it was a masterpiece. Angela peeked in. "If he's too much, just plop him in front of the TV. He doesn't need to learn anything today anyway." I bent to grab the broom, lips parting, but no words came out. She pulled her suitcase to the door. "Oh, lunchboxes are in the fridge. Don't let Sophie eat too much sugar. She had a toothache yesterday." "What time do you land?" I asked. 3:30, Dennis will pick me up and the kids." She waved a hand like brushing lint from a sleeve. "They're with you, just like always." The door slammed shut. The house was quiet again, just me and the 2 kids. Max was zipping around the living room, running takeoff experiments on his green skateboard. Sophie, on the other hand, was sitting quietly by the window coloring. She looked up at me and asked softly, "Grandma, why are you always so busy?" I froze. Her voice was purely curious, no judgment, no pity, just the kind of question only a child could ask. I didn't know how to answer. "Do you like doing all this?" she asked again. I smiled faintly and knelt beside her to tidy her papers. "I used to think I did, and now I'm not so sure." She furrowed her little brows as if trying to figure out what I meant, but a second later she went right back to coloring her pink bunny. Around 10:30, the doorbell rang. It was Sharon, holding a bag of apple pie, wearing that old t-shirt with the little dove print and her usual bright grin. "I stopped by the farmer's market and thought of you," she said as she stepped in. "That party yesterday looked lively on Instagram." I gave her a weary smile. "Lively, yes. Cleanup was all me." "What, again? You did it all by yourself?" I just nodded. She glanced around the kitchen and living room, then at Max crawling on the floor and whistled. "You look like a full-time unpaid house manager." I laughed, but didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. She was so right it actually stung a little. "You're not their maid, Marilyn," she said calmly. "You're not an on-call nanny. You're a person with a name, with interests, with a pulse. Not some automated system for domestic operations." "They're not bad people," I murmured. "They're just used to me always being here." "That's the problem," she said, leaning on the kitchen doorway. "Once you become part of the scenery, they stop seeing you." Her words stopped me cold. I looked out the window at the bits of party ribbon still fluttering in the yard. A strange heaviness pressed against my chest. "Have you ever thought about what would happen if one day you weren't here?" she asked. I shook my head. My throat tightened. "I never used to." "Well, let's start thinking now." She flashed a grin and pulled a pink flyer from her tote bag. "Women's Support Circle, Friday morning. I go every week. You should come." I took the paper. The soft pink background read, "Being seen starts with showing up." My fingers burned a little as I held it. The cut from the broken glass still ached faintly. That's when it hit me. It hadn't healed. It was still bleeding, just quietly, just out of habit. I stared at the flyer and nodded slowly. I'll come, Sharon smiled. I'll pick you up. We made a plan. That Friday, I was ready 20 minutes early. I wore a slate blue sweater and curled my hair slightly. In the mirror, I didn't look like someone going to a gathering. I looked more like someone heading into an uncertain job interview. Sharon pulled into my driveway right on time, wearing sunglasses and waving out the window. Hop in, today's lesson, how to stop saying sorry all the time. I laughed and got in the car. She had the radio on, an old Carole King song, It's Too Late. The soft rhythm, the lyrics, they felt like they were pulled straight from my chest. The women's circle met in the community room at the city library, a small, warm space with chairs arranged in a circle. Posters lined the walls. You're not alone. Stop shrinking to fit spaces you've outgrown. I hesitated when I walked in, unsure where to look. Everyone was chatting, smiling like it was a reunion of longtime friends. I hovered by the doorway, feeling like a guest in the wrong movie. Sharon patted my shoulder. Sit here. I'll grab you some tea. Her voice, kind and unwavering, broke through the noise like a lifeline. I settled into a chair in the corner. Next to me was an older woman with a full head of silver hair, wearing a bold red jacket and a brooch shaped like a hummingbird. She offered her hand. I'm Irene, retired nurse. First time here? I nodded, trying to smile, the corners of my mouth trembling with uncertainty. Hi, I'm Marilyn. Firsts are hard, she said warmly. I came for the first time last year. Was so nervous I didn't say a word. Ended up crying anyway. I didn't even bring enough tissues. I chuckled, a small, real laugh, and felt some of the tightness in my chest ease. It had been there so long I almost didn't recognize it as fear, just thought it was part of me by now. The facilitator was a woman named Tamara, her hair a soft cloud of lavender gray. She wore simple clothes, linen maybe, but everything about her felt composed, like someone who had learned how to carry heavy things without showing the strain. Her voice had a grounded strength, neither loud nor soft, like the crisp sound of a pencil moving across paper. Today's theme, she began, is who I am is not defined by what I do for others. She paused, letting the words settle like dust finding a surface. Let's go around. Share a moment, recent if possible, when you felt unseen. One by one, the women spoke. Some stories were small, not being heard at work, being interrupted at the dinner table. Others were larger, grown children forgetting birthdays, husbands acting as if emotions were clutter. I listened, nodding, occasionally smiling. It was like hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud in voices that weren't mine. Then it was my turn. I shook my head instinctively. I don't really have anything to share. I felt the old impulse to disappear, to stay useful and quiet. Sharon looked at me with those soft, steady eyes. It's okay. We're listening. I opened my mouth, intending to say something light, but the words came out like water breaking through a dam. I spent 5 days last week planning my grandson's birthday party. I baked a cake, decorated the backyard, bought balloons, even made 4 types of salad. I paused, my voice quiet and flat. When they took the family photo, they didn't include me, said I was still busy. The room went still. There was no awkward laughter, no rush to fill the silence, just presence. People holding space in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I'm not asking to be thanked, I whispered. I just realized I've been taken for granted for so long I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Irene passed me a tissue. I hadn't even realized tears were slipping from the corners of my eyes. Tamara nodded slowly, like someone recognizing a truth that needed no decoration. Being useful, she said, is not the same as being loved. Her words didn't just land, they rooted. They touched something dull and buried inside me, like a forgotten note from a younger self. Frank's voice rose again in my memory like a skipping record. You take care of the kids and the house because that's your job. That's what women do. It's for the family. I didn't question it back then. And when he died, I carried that voice like an inheritance. I kept repeating to myself, you matter because you're useful. Stay useful and they'll need you. Stay needed and maybe you'll feel loved. But today, for the first time, I saw it clearly. Useful isn't the same thing as loved, not even close. On the drive home, Nora Jones's Don't Know Why played softly in the car. The street slipped past the window in slow motion, the late afternoon sun streaking across the windshield like a veil of memory. Sharon drove quietly, letting the silence stay, only glancing at me now and then like a reminder that she was still there, that someone was still there. It wasn't sadness I felt. Not exactly. It was clarity, sharp, overdue, a little painful, like pulling out a splinter you'd lived with for years, only now realizing how deep it went. And somewhere between the last verse of the song and the curve in the road, I decided I wasn't going to shrink anymore. Not for comfort, not for peace, and definitely not to be useful. When I got home, I didn't head straight for the kitchen. Instead, I walked into the living room and opened a worn music folder I hadn't touched in years. My fingers brushed across the yellowing sheets, breathing in the faint scent of old paper and dust. I pulled out a piece, an old tune I used to teach, and sat down at the electric piano by the window. I used to be a teacher, a piano teacher. I pressed the first key. The sound was faint, a little shaky, but it was real. Outside, a neighbor walking her dog paused for a few seconds. He smiled, nodded, then kept moving. I played the entire piece. My hands trembled a bit. The keys were sticky with time, but I didn't stop. I wasn't playing for anyone else. At that moment, I just wanted to tell myself I'm still here. That afternoon, the sun was just right. I had just finished a Schubert piece and was about to close the piano lid when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Angela standing there, the kind of exhaustion on her face that left no room for small talk. She had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Sophie stood behind her with her backpack, looking sullen. "Mom, I need a favor," Angela said right away. "Sophie's got camp next week and I've got a work trip. Dennis can take Max, but I'm completely out of options." I looked at her, calm and steady. "I've got rehearsal that week." She blinked, clearly not understanding. "You've got what?" "Rehearsal," I repeated, sitting back down on the couch. "There's a piano recital at the library next month." Angela stood frozen for a moment, confused. "What are you talking about? Since when are you taking piano lessons again? Can't you reschedule? This is important. Sophie needs you." "I need me too," I said, meeting her gaze. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Her face shifted. "You're refusing to help?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "You've never said no before." I nodded gently. "That's true. I didn't know I could." Angela dropped the bag to the floor, her frustration simmering. "Do you know how busy I am? If I land this client, I'll get promoted by the end of the year. And you're choosing a recital over helping your granddaughter?" I didn't answer directly. I just looked at her the way you might look at a version of yourself from long ago, the kind of woman who always put others first until there was nothing left of her. Sophie tugged lightly at her mom's sleeve. "Can we just go home?" she asked softly. Angela looked down at her daughter and something in her face shifted. The anger ebbed a little, replaced by something messier. She picked up the bag. "Fine. I'll figure something else out." She turned to go, but I called after her. "Angela." She didn't turn around. "I'm not saying I won't ever help you. I'm just saying I can't be the person who never has a life of her own." She stood at the door for several seconds before muttering, "I didn't expect you to turn into this." "And I never expected I could," I said quietly. The door closed. My heart was pounding, my palms were slick with sweat. I sat on the couch for a long while. Then my phone rang. Brian. "Mom, did you forget to pay for Lucas's summer camp?" he asked right away. "Natalie's card got declined and said the charge hadn't gone through." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "I didn't forget," I replied. "I've decided I won't be covering your children's expenses anymore." Silence. "What? Since when?" he snapped. "You said—" "That was before," I interrupted. "Starting now, you and Natalie are Lucas's parents. His needs are your responsibility. My retirement fund isn't a backup account for your household budget." There was a pause. Then his voice turned accusatory. "Did Angela say something to you? Is she putting ideas in your head?" No one said anything. I stood, walking toward the window, looking out at the roses in the garden. "I've just decided to spend my time and money on things that matter to me." "You've changed," his voice dropped. "Yes, I've changed." Then I added, "And maybe I changed far too late." I hung up. A month ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting in a sunroom with a dozen women singing "You've Got a Friend," I probably would have smiled and said, "That sounds like someone else's life." But here I was, settled into a slightly worn yet sturdy folding chair, a cup of coffee in hand, sunlight streaming in through the blinds, pooling in stripes across the floor. Around me sat silver-haired women, bright-eyed and animated. We were Coastal Voices, a local women's arts group for seniors. The members ranged in age from 62 to 78. Some had been nurses, some lawyers, one had danced professionally on Broadway. Different lives, different histories, but every single one of them had been invisible once, to family, to society, to themselves. It was my first rehearsal. I was nervous, sat off to the side with my sheet music and a bottle of water. Lana, the group leader, was a former musical theater performer. Her ponytail bounced when she walked, her voice as bright as a silver bell. "Marilyn, over here, we saved you a good seat," she called. They welcomed me in like I'd always belonged. We started with warm-up exercises. I couldn't quite match the tempo at first, and my voice barely left my throat. Lana came over and patted my shoulder gently. "Don't worry," she said. "This is our world. No judges, no audience." I smiled slowly. My voice began to blend into the harmony like a drop of water finally finding its stream. After rehearsal, we sat around chatting. One woman shared how she left an unhealthy marriage in her 60s. Another spoke about her solo road trip after losing her husband. Someone else recounted the joy of filing her taxes alone for the first time and getting it right. I listened, each story peeling back a layer I didn't know I was still hiding beneath. It stung a little, but it also felt like breathing. Sharon gave me a knowing wink. "Told you you belong here." I nodded, my eyes stinging. I wasn't just useful in a life someone else had scheduled for me. I was wanted in a life I chose for myself. After lunch, someone suggested we each play a favorite piece. I hesitated, then walked slowly toward the upright piano. I played Edelweiss. It's not a hard song. The melody is soft, familiar. I used to play it for Angela when she was little. She always said, "This one sounds like flowers blooming." When I finished, the room filled with applause. But it wasn't the polite kind you get when your kid says, "Thanks, Mom." It wasn't the occasional "not bad" Frank used to mutter. This was real. This was applause for me. I stood and said quietly, "It's been over 20 years since I played a full piece in front of anyone." Connie, the woman seated beside me, reached over and squeezed my hand. "You play like you never stopped." That afternoon back home, my phone lit up. Angela's name on the screen. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because I'd finally realized something. I didn't need to be available at all times. My time could be mine. I made a cup of lemon tea, opened the living room curtains. The light poured in like a quiet permission slip. The sweater still lay at the bottom of the drawer. I didn't touch it. Sophie's voice came back to me. "Grandma, why are you always so busy?" I hadn't answered her then, but now I knew the truth, because I never stopped long enough to ask myself what I wanted. I sat down at the piano, opened the old music book once again. At that same moment, Angela was sitting on a bar stool in her kitchen, listening to the final beep of my voicemail before it clicked off. Her face was tight, one hand pressed to her temple. Dennis walked in holding a scrap of paper, Sophie's drawing, a crayon sketch that read, "I miss Grandma." Angela sighed. "She's completely shut us out now." Dennis leaned against the fridge, his voice calm but firm. "No, she's finally paying attention to herself." Angela looked at him, lips pressed into a cold, thin line. "Easy for you to say." "I'm not saying it to be smug," he said, pausing as he glanced at the drawing. "You know, my mom raised me alone after her divorce. She worked at a bank, day shifts, night shifts. I'd wake up at midnight and the kitchen lights would still be on. She just finished closing reports and she'd be packing my lunch and washing my uniform." He looked up, voice softer. Her eyes were always red, but she never said a word. Angela stayed quiet. "I couldn't do anything to help then," Dennis said. "But I remember she'd stand at the stove sometimes, just staring at the pot like she forgot who she was." "Marilyn's not your mom." "No," he said. "She's stronger. She lasted longer. And when someone holds everything together for too long, the moment they stop, you better not stand in their way." He looked her in the eye. "A woman can hold up the sky, but she can also get so tired she can't see herself anymore." Angela didn't respond. Outside, the garbage truck rumbled by. She glanced toward the sound, then seemed to remember something, how even taking the trash out had never been her job. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning, unexpected and quiet. I was just about to head out for rehearsal when I found it in the mailbox, an envelope made of thick cream-colored paper, stamped with the logo of the local library. It felt almost like an old-fashioned concert invitation, the kind from decades ago. My fingertips trembled as I held it. As I opened the letter, I could hear Frank's voice in my head. You're a housewife. Stop wasting time dreaming about nonsense. But the words on the page silenced him instantly. Dear Marilyn, we are honored to invite you to perform as a solo pianist at the upcoming Voices of the City Women's Arts Gala, to be held on the 25th at City Hall. We believe that a voice is more than a sound. It's proof of presence. I read it 3 times before I believed it was real. That afternoon, I brought the letter to our group. The room erupted. Music sheets nearly went flying. Lana hugged me and spun me around. I knew someone would discover you. You play like you're telling the truth. Sharon leaned in, grinning. You better wear red that day. Red means you're not in the background anymore. I shook my head, laughing. I'm not making a comeback. I'm just playing one song. She tilted her head, suddenly serious. You were always meant to be on a stage. A few days later, she came with me to a small boutique in town. We were flipping through rows of scarves when she pulled out a red wool one from the back corner and draped it over my shoulders. This one. You wear this, and no one's going to mistake you for part of the wallpaper. I glanced in the mirror. There stood a woman, upright and still, her neck wrapped in warmth and color. A single word floated into my mind. Present. I was here, and I was seen. The day of the performance, sunlight poured down in rare golden streaks. There was already a line outside City Hall. I entered through the side door with my performer's badge, changed clothes, and waited backstage. The MC was warming up the crowd. My hands were cold, my heartbeat rattled like it did the very first time I stepped on stage in my 20s. I glanced at my phone. A message from Angela lit up the screen. Client crisis. Stuck at the office. Can't make it tonight. Good luck. I stared at the message. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. Her absence no longer defined my worth. A few minutes before my set, the backstage door creaked open. Dennis stepped in, holding Sophie's hand. Hope it's okay we came uninvited, he said quietly. Sophie ran up to me, eyes wide. Grandma, I wore the yellow dress you like. I hugged her. My heart bloomed with something like sunlight. Angela stood in the kitchen, fingers tightening around the edge of the counter like it might ground her. Her face was flushed, not just with anger, but with something else. Confusion, maybe. Fear. The kind that creeps in when the story you've told yourself starts to unravel. Dennis turned back to the kettle and poured the hot water over the tea bag in his mug. Not pushing, not trying to win. Just present. Calm. I'm not saying she didn't choose some of it, he said, his tone gentler now. But choosing something and never being allowed to unchoose it, those are different things. Angela exhaled, shaky. She looked down at the photo Sophie had brought home. Marilyn, her mother, seated at the grand piano, light pooling around her like it had been waiting years for her to arrive. There was something radiant about her expression, relieved, unburdened, real. Angela couldn't remember the last time she'd seen her mother's face like that. She never used to talk about her feelings, Angela said, almost to herself. Growing up, it was always about what needed to be done. Dinner, homework, laundry, school events. And when I got sick that year in 8th grade, she slept in a chair next to my bed for a week. She just kept going, like she was made of steel. Dennis nodded, sipping his tea. Steel bends eventually. Angela's eyes clouded. Maybe I wanted to believe she was fine, because if she wasn't, then I'd have to admit I never asked. Her voice wavered, then steadied into something colder, more guarded. But this whole thing, you made it dramatic. The piano recital? You should have told me. You should have let me take her. She didn't want to be a favor passed around, Dennis said. She wanted to be a woman with something to say. And last night she said it, through that music. Through every note. Angela sat down at the kitchen table slowly. I didn't mean to make her invisible. I know you didn't, Dennis replied. But sometimes love that's never questioned starts to look like entitlement. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft hum of the kettle and the distant chatter of Sophie playing in her room. Angela's voice, when it came again, was quieter. She always used to hum Moon River when she did the dishes. I forgot that. Dennis gave her a look that was almost a smile. She said it was her mother's favorite, too. Maybe that song isn't just nostalgia, it's a bridge. Angela traced her finger over the grain of the table. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe don't try to fix it, Dennis said. Maybe just start by listening. Upstairs, Sophie's laughter echoed briefly, light and free. Angela closed her eyes, letting it settle over her. For the first time in a long while, she realized she didn't know who her mother had become, and that maybe, just maybe, it was time to find out. That afternoon, Marilyn sat in her sunlit dining room, sorting through old sheet music. Her fingers moved delicately, lingering over each page like they were pieces of memory. She didn't hear the footsteps at first. "Mom!" Angela's voice came from the hallway, uncertain. Marilyn looked up, her expression unreadable. Angela hesitated in the doorway, then stepped inside. "I saw the video," she said. "Sophie showed me. She swallowed. "You were incredible." Marilyn gave a small smile. "Thank you." Angela sat across from her, awkwardly folding her hands. "I'm sorry I didn't come. I didn't even know it was happening." "I wasn't sure you'd want to," Marilyn said, not accusingly, just plainly. "You usually have a lot going on." Angela's shoulders sank. "I do, but I shouldn't have assumed you'd always be here waiting in the background. I guess I just got used to you being there." "I know," Marilyn said softly, "and I let myself disappear because I thought it was love." Angela blinked quickly, her eyes wet now. "I don't want you to disappear. I want to know who you are, not just who you've been for me." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Marilyn reached across the table, gently placing her hand over her daughter's. "Well," she said, her smile warm and slightly mischievous, "I did just rediscover Chopin." Angela laughed, tearful. "Then maybe you can teach me." And in the soft light of that room, something began, tentatively, tenderly, not a repair but a recognition, a new beginning. That same moment, I was at home sifting through an old drawer when I found a photograph. Angela was 6. I'd taken her to her first piano concert. She sat on my lap, her eyes wide with wonder, fixed on the stage. Back then, she'd say, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to play piano too." But she grew up, and now she's the one telling her kids, "Don't bother Mommy, she's working." I don't blame her. It's not all her fault. She was raised to believe my mom is supposed to be like this, quiet, reliable, non-disruptive. I no longer wonder when they'll understand me. All I know is I'm not going back to the kitchen. From today forward, I will no longer be the silent footnote of my own life. Later that afternoon, I had just wrapped up a lunch hour rehearsal and was about to head to the market when my phone rang. It was Brian. "Hey, Mom. We're planning Thanksgiving this year, inviting a few friends over. Natalie thought it'd be easier if we did it at your place again. More space outside and you're great with the food. We'll bring dessert. Just easier with the kids not tearing up our house." I stood at the car, hand on the door handle, paused. "I already have plans for Thanksgiving," I said. "I'll be assisting at a piano salon that day." There was a beat of silence, as if he hadn't processed it. "You have plans?" "Yes. I've helped organize a Silver Arts program for the community. I'm managing logistics and performance coordination." I opened the car door and got in. "So no, I won't be hosting this year." His voice lifted slightly. "But we've already told people. Natalie sent out the invites. They're expecting to have dinner at your house. You can't just back out." I heard that phrase, "your house," and felt the irony twist inside me. It only became our home when they needed something. "You can tell them your mom will be at the piano this year, not making mashed potatoes," I said calmly. He hesitated, then replied with a touch of sarcasm. "Let me guess. Angela got to you? You two are both in this whole independence phase or something now?" "No," I said evenly. "It's because I never used to understand the word boundaries. Your father, your husband, your household should not depend on a 66-year-old woman to carry your logistics and your finances." Another pause. Then his voice turned cutting. "So what? You're just going off to live your little life now?" "You could say that," I smiled. "Oh, and tell Natalie to stop forwarding your mortgage statements to me. They're not my problem." They never were. I slipped my phone into my purse, hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't turn the key right away. This was my first time refusing their holiday nomination. No guilt, no second-guessing, just freedom. That afternoon, I walked into the community center's activity room, the familiar hum of voices and the light scent of cinnamon air freshener greeting me like a ritual. Our Silver Keys piano class was now in week 6, and the rhythm of it had become its own kind of heartbeat. The group had grown. What began as 4 women hesitantly pressing keys had become 9 bold learners, each bringing something personal, something alive, into the room. 2 of them, Joan and Lenora, drove 40 minutes from the next town each week just to be part of this. They said it was worth it just to feel like they had a room in the world where age wasn't a limit but an instrument. Grace, my ever-colorful student, wore a golden knit sweater and announced before class even started, "This is my performance color. Gold means I believe in myself today." Her confidence was endearing, even if her C major arpeggios still wandered a little. But her laugh filled the room louder and brighter than any chord. It was that kind of energy that made the space feel sacred. I had everyone play the piece they were most familiar with. No pressure, no judgment, just expression. Some chose nursery rhymes from childhood, fingers stumbling but faces glowing. One woman played a broken but earnest version of Silent Night. The notes wobbled, but the sincerity was perfect. When it was my turn, I sat at the upright piano with its slightly uneven middle pedal and let my hands settle into place. I played Clair de Lune. The moment the first note sounded, the room stilled completely. Conversations paused, breath slowed. Grace watched me as if she were witnessing a spell being cast, then leaned over to whisper, "You should have been on stage 20 years ago." I smiled, hands still moving. Back then, I thought the kitchen was my stage. Her gaze softened. She reached for my hand after the final note and gave it a gentle squeeze that spoke volumes. Respect, recognition, maybe even a kind of apology none of us knew we were offering. After class, I picked up a piece of chalk and wrote on the blackboard in cursive, "You're not too late, you're right on time." Someone gasped softly behind me. I didn't turn to see who. I just smiled. That evening, I got a message from Natalie. "Since you're not helping with Thanksgiving this year, we've decided to go out. Lucas was hoping for your pumpkin pie, but oh well." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, not even out of hurt. I simply understood now that their disappointment wasn't mine to solve. I stood in the doorway of my kitchen, eyes drifting toward the worn recipe binder beside the oven. Its pages were curled, yellowed at the edges like dried petals. I hadn't opened it in 3 weeks. For the first time in years, the sight of it didn't make me feel guilty. I wasn't failing anyone. I was choosing myself. I no longer needed to bake to prove I was lovable. That weekend, I attended another women's empowerment forum at the library. The room buzzed with quiet energy, the kind of hum that comes from shared stories and unspoken resilience. I sat among strangers who didn't feel like strangers. When the speaker, a woman with a silver scarf and a voice like soft thunder, said, "We were never born to be someone's something. We were born whole," something clicked inside me like a long-forgotten key turning. I wrote the words down in my notebook and circled them in red. I wasn't just Brian's mother or Lucas's grandmother. I was Marilyn Thompson, piano teacher, community volunteer, woman reclaiming her life. And that identity didn't need anyone's permission. Outside, the weather had changed. Leaves fell in crisp, quiet showers from the sycamore trees, the world settling into autumn. I took down the bright wind chimes from summer and hung a soft wreath instead. Burnt orange, russet, and cranberry-colored fabric leaves. It didn't chime in the wind, but it rustled, whispered. A reminder, it's time for a seasonal change. Angela had been quieter. No frantic phone calls, no babysitting requests, no lists of favors or emergencies to fix, but I could feel it. She was circling back. One afternoon, after teaching Silver Keys, I was filing sheet music into a bin when I heard a familiar voice. "Mom?" I turned. Angela stood at the doorway, coat still on, Sophie's hand in hers, one foot already inside the room. "Can we just listen for a bit?" I nodded. No questions, just yes. Sophie darted toward me. "Grandma, what are you playing today?" I picked her up and set her gently on a nearby chair. "Over the Rainbow? Just for you." Angela remained near the door, her posture uncertain, but her eyes full of something new. Not expectation, not judgment, just watching. She wasn't looking for flaws or signs of exhaustion. She was seeing me, really seeing me. Grace leaned toward her and whispered, "Your mom's eyes light up when she plays." I saw the words ripple through Angela like a pebble dropped in still water. She walked to a seat in the back and sat, quietly clutching her purse strap. She stayed that way until the last note faded, the room filled with applause, and she finally exhaled. Like someone surfacing after holding her breath for years. After class, she lingered. I was putting away books when I felt her presence beside me. "When I was a kid, didn't you used to play that song every Christmas?" I paused. "Yes, you were in The Wizard of Oz that year. I played it every day so you could practice." She nodded slowly. I forgot that. Her voice cracked. But today, when Sophie heard it, she held my hand and asked, "Did Grandma play that for you when you were little?" Angela's smile was faint, but her eyes brimmed with guilt. I didn't know how to answer. It took me a long time to remember. She looked down. I always thought of you as part of the house, the meals, the rides, the band-aids, but watching you today, her voice wavered. I realized I became just like Dad. He never saw you as more than the woman who made life work. I turned to face her. I'm not here to blame, I said softly. I just want to be seen. I've always been more than someone's support system. Angela's tears fell silently. I don't want to be that kind of daughter anymore. I know, I said, taking her hand. We're all just women, learning how to be mothers, and how to be more than mothers. She looked up, eyes shining. Could you teach me to play? I smiled. Of course, but fair warning, I make my students practice. She laughed full and free. Then she hugged me tightly, and for the first time we were not roles, not archetypes, just women reaching for one another. That night at dinner, Sophie handed me a drawing. 3 stick figures, 1 piano, big smiles. This is you, she said, and Mommy and me, playing together. I looked at the crayon lines, bold and imperfect, overflowing with joy, and I felt something new, not nostalgia, not regret. Hope. Because some wounds don't close with silence. They stay open just long enough to let something beautiful grow. And we, Angela and I, were finally stepping into a new kind of mother-daughter story, one with music and laughter and room for both of us to breathe.